So
Okay,
my
welcome everybody. We have Mr. Rick, and help me on your spelling.
Dimanin.
Dimanin, Rick Dimanin. Thanks for being with us today for the Sweet on Detroit Beekeeping Club. And we are going to be talking about some of the research that Rick did on using reishi mushrooms for bee health.
Okay, thank you. I'm just a little bit about myself. I've been beekeeping for about 12 years. I got my master in beekeeping from Cornell last year. I've done a lot in terms of experimenting with bees, and science is one of my pet likes in life. So what I decided to do was to test a project that somebody had written an article about, the only published article so far. And I'll get into that in a second. So this is what I did in terms of, okay, this is why I did it. You know, I've had many times when I've taken care of my mites, and my colonies still died over the winter. And one of the things that kills them are the viruses. And until 2018, there was nothing that you could do for viruses other than requeen and maybe change out comb and that type of thing. So mites transmit viruses. There's no question about it. They basically transmit pretty much almost every virus that a bee can get. And it's not a good thing. The most prevalent virus is deformed wing. And there are two ways of measuring viruses. One is with qualitative PCR, and you've heard about PCR tests with COVID. And another method is, in the method that I used, is basically a method developed for the US Army to determine active viruses in the field. And we'll get into that. So what I did with mites, the viruses, I wanted to do something for my project for my master beekeeping that made something. I didn't want to do a book report. I wanted to do something that had action in it. So this is the article I'm talking about. You couldn't do anything about viruses until this particular article was written. And Paul Stamets has done TED Talks, etc. He's a mycologist. That's someone who deals with mushrooms. And he is quite successful, and he has a company called Fungi Perfecti. It's on West Coast, I believe in Washington. And he basically got his start by going around the forest and looking at the mushrooms. And he noticed that the bees seemed to be foraging on mushrooms, certain mushrooms. Those mushrooms are called polypore mushrooms. Polypore mushrooms are those that basically degrade wood. And so it makes a lot of sense. And when you see a bee on top of a mushroom, what is that bee doing there? There's no nectar, there's no pollen. What's that bee doing there? So anyway, this article came out, and I thought it was extremely interesting. Before the study, they only had indirect methods of dealing with mites. As I said, you can requeen, you could change out comb. You could do shook swarms, which are basically you take your colony and you get another box, fill it full of foundation, and then shake out all the bees onto that new foundation and make them draw out new comb. Those are pretty much the methods that were available prior to 2018. So the virus, as I said, virus infections cause dead outs in overwintered colonies. And there really were not any direct treatments available. You couldn't give them any type of medication at all to deal with the viruses. until that article came out. So, you know, like I said, even if you control your mites, viruses are still present. So this is what they did in the Washington State Paul Stamets study. They used 2 types of polypore mycelia. Now the mycelia is basically, if you've ever seen something with a fungus on it, you see this this foundation of white fibers. And then from the white fibers, the mushroom, that's called the fruiting body, evolves. But the mycelia contain all of the amino acids, all of the good chemicals that that particular mushroom needs to grow. So they used reishi and amido. Those are 2 types of mushrooms that are found that decay wood. And what they did, they put them in cages inside the laboratory. They put 100 bees in a cup, basically, and fed them, took virus counts of them, PCR, and then fed them the mushroom extracts. And when they did that, they found that it was an incredible results that they had. So they replicated those experiments in the field, and they had somewhat less of a virus knockdown, but it was still very significant. They used 35 frame nukes, and they fed them 3 liters of a 1% solution. You basically put the solution, the extract in 1-to-1 sugar water. You have to figure out the percentages, but it's not very much. So that's what they did. And I wanted to do something a little different. So this is what they found in that study. Both extracts significantly lowered Lake Sinai virus and deformed wing virus. Those are those initials in the field. Amido extract was 800 times decrease in deformed wing virus levels in cage experiments. Now that's incredible. I'm sorry, let me go back. That is just incredible. And the field studies confirmed this, the cage results. The amido reduced deformed wing virus 79.7%, and Ganoderma, which is the reishi, reduced at 79.6%, which is just incredible. Regarding Lake Sinai virus, amido, as you can see, 87 point, almost 88%, and reishi decreased it by 45,000 times more than the controls. They also took a piece of birch wood and sawed it, you know, took a saw to it, the birch wood they found in the forest, and sawed it and got some sawdust. And they also basically showed that there's some type of fungus that was endemic in the birch wood, and it had some antiviral activity. And I thought it was very, very interesting. So, you know, after they published their article, there was nothing. I was waiting for something to come out in the scientific literature, and there wasn't anything. I was expecting someone to come up with some type of thing that they would sell to the beekeepers, that they could put in their sugar water that would decrease the virus levels, but they didn't. So what I decided to do, I used a 2% solution, and rather than a 1%, and I just used reishi. And the reason I used the 2% is because there's a thing in science that says when you get out in the field and you test things, it doesn't come out as well as it did in the laboratory. So I used 2%. I wanted to double the dose, and I wanted to see what would that do to the bees. So what I did, I used 8 6-frame nukes assembled from overwinter stock. And I got new queens from California. And I use, as I said, I use insulated hives mostly. And I had a licensed 6-frame or Apamea 7-frame polynuke. Yeah, I really love the polynukes. The insulation is fantastic with nukes. and can mean the difference between something being alive and dead. As far as I'm concerned, I've tried, overwintering nukes and wooden nukes, and I get much better results when I do in poly. So anyway, what I did, I'm on 3 lots. My house is in the middle. I have a west yard, my house, and then an east yard. So I medicated, I gave hives 1 through 4 and put them in the west yard of my house. And I put colonies 5 through 8 in the east yard. And I used the extract on the first 4 colonies, 1 through 4. And I just fed the ones on the east lot. I simply gave them 1-to-1 sugar water. One of the reasons I did this is because even though I'm on the 3 lots, I still have a lot of drifting and drone drifting and also forager drifting. So I wanted to confine the drifting to one group or the other. I didn't want a wayward bee coming from the unmedicated group to go into a medicated hive and vice versa, because that would screw up my results. So medicated colonies, they receive 2 liters of 2% volume, commercially available reishi mushroom extract in sugar water. As I said, the controls receive 2 liters of 1-to-1. Every colony started out with at least 2 frames of capped to open brood with additional frames of pollen and honey. I could see nothing in terms of the brood. I didn't see any diseases at all. That's how I started. So on June 17, I took a baseline. I took basically 100 live bees from the second brood frame, and I did that for every test. I took the 100 bees from the second brood frame, and those were my test subjects. What I do, that once I collected them, I put them in a plastic bag, I stuck them in the refrigerator, then I sent them to BVS in Montana. And that was my process of obtaining the samples. As you can see, I did it on June 17 for my baseline. I did that across every one of the 8 nukes. And then I took additional samples on June 24, July 1, and July 7. As I was telling you, PCR is one way of figuring out viruses, whether you have viruses in your colonies. The problem with PCR is that it is a molecular. It works looking for the molecules of the viruses. This particular, and it's very, very sensitive, but BVS uses this electrospray differential mobility analysis. Basically, what this does, it will tell you what viruses are present. I mean, the entire virus or a significant portion of the virus, as opposed to simply the molecules that you get with PCR. And the molecules do not cause the problem. The problem with viruses come when the viruses are whole and they attack the bees. So it cost me about $50 a sample. The whole thing cost me about $1,600 in fees to get the analysis done. So as I stated on June 19, I took the samples on the 17th. 2 days later, I fed colonies 1 through 4 in the west yard at 2% solution in 1-1 sugar water, and I gave my control colonies just the sugar water. One thing I noticed when I went in to get my second sample of bees on June 24 was in the control colonies, all the sugar water was gone. But in the medicated colonies, about 20% remained. And I couldn't figure that out. The only thing I could think of, there are 2 possibilities. First of all, the extract has to come in alcohol. And that is a problem. Bees don't like alcohol. We're talking very, very little. I mean, you're talking less than an ounce of extract per liter. So when they went down, and I found that the medicated colonies did not suck up the syrup as the other ones did. But they did finally finish it by the third sampling date. So I had a control, I took a sample, and then the following sample, all of it was gone. All the medication was gone. And this is what my colonies look like. This is my west yard. These are 4 of the nukes. Just give you an idea what, and my house is back here. And this is my east yard, and you can see the nukes. Like I said, these are all poly nukes. I do use wooden supers on them, but like I said, so that's what this looks like. This is how I did it. I would measure out the extract, and that's the bottle right there of the mushroom extract, mycelia extract that I got from Fungi Perfecti. It's off the shelf, commercial, don't have to do anything. I just measured it out. I put it in the beaker, and then I filled, that's how much, 20 milliliters. And then I filled that up with, I put that amount in the big beaker, and that's 1 liter. So you can see that is not very much extract per liter, visually anyway. And there I was pouring the sugar water over the extract. Oops. And okay, so one thing I did, I wanted to make sure that all the colonies were equalized, and I did that. And this is me in the process of doing that. I put the feeders on. These Apame feeders are great. They hold a liter each. So there's two feeders. Each of them holds a liter. And it was very great, very easy for my experiment. The medications in the colonies. Okay, so this is what happened on one of them. My first hive had a queen event. I don't know what happened. There wasn't a queen in there. It was right after I took my baseline, and the first sampling after the medication was administered. So I don't know what happened, but I didn't have a queen. And I saw a lot of bees there at the entrance, and there was some robbing. So then I had to take out hive 1 from the study on July 1. I just was not confident at all in any results I would get. As I said here, the medicated colonies took more time taking the 2% solution. And I believe it probably due to the alcohol, or it could be due to the taste of the extract. I don't know. But it really wasn't that significant. As I said, they did suck it down within 10 days.
You think that's because it burned off? Or like,
yeah, burned off, or I think that the bees, they only took so much alcohol at a time. And I think that it may have evaporated. I really don't know.
Yeah.
So
They were drunk, hanging out at the bottom for a while. And then
so when I got done with my final sampling was on July 7, and I inspected all the brood frames. I didn't see anything abnormal at all. All of them had, as I said, a laying queen, fresh eggs, and everything seemed to be fine. So this is what I got back from BVS. Now I have some better graphs, but this is what I got back. Now this is kind of complicated, but as you can see, hives 1 through 8, and this is the second. That was the initial baseline. This next group over, coming from the left, 1B through 8B, are the results that were obtained right after being fed the extract. And then the third week, the third sampling was 1C through, it's kind of backwards, but 8C. And then the final sampling, oops, I'll keep doing that. The final sampling, set 4, were put all together. Now, when I saw this, one of the things is BVS does a really great job. They measure the weight of the bees, the average weight. They measure nosema. They also measure mite levels. They measure everything for you, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a little complicated to look at. They give you a really nice key. And one thing that really got me interested was hive number 2. Now, if you see the initial baseline, oh, I keep doing that. Hive number 2, the original baseline, there's over 1 million viruses. That red is sac brood. So there are over 1 million viruses there on that particular one. Oh, darn it. Oh, what am I doing? Oh, sorry. Okay, the over 1 million viruses. And I looked over here to this, right at this, remember, this is the first sampling I did after I gave them the medicine. I'm looking at hive number 2, no red at all. So that kind of gave me hope that this stuff was working. It was killing sac brood. Now, sac brood, although deformed wing virus is the most common virus that you'll find in your colonies on a molecular level, the most common for entire viruses or significant virus particles are sac brood. Sac brood is in the colonies, usually peaks in the spring, early summer, and then it peaks again in August. And I'll get more into sac brood as we go on, because that's a very understudied virus, and it's nasty. It can be very nasty. So the green right there was the nosema spores. You can see the green line. Okay, we'll go back. So when I did my final samples, sorry, I had a link. Okay, this is sac brood. Sac brood infected larvae change. You know, and you have to get used to looking at the pictures and getting familiar with the bee diseases. That's extremely important in beekeeping. And one of the ways that I did it was I went through and would look at a picture, memorize the picture, and then look at my colonies to see if I could find it. Then I put them on index cards, mixed them up, because that's what I was tested on, that part of it, and mixed them up, and then I see if I could diagnose it without having the caption underneath and telling me what it was. So yeah, sac brood is spread by viruses, by mites. It's also spread by foragers. Pollen can have it on it. And there really isn't anything that you can do to get rid of sac brood in a colony. No known treatments. And that's the Bee Informed Partnership, or BIP. There are absolutely nothing you could do. So I was very, very hopeful after seeing those initial results that I finally have something that can take care of sac brood. So Varroa, as I said before, is really, really important because it spreads a lot of viruses. And, you know, mites are just terrible, and they do spread viruses. There's only 1 or 2 viruses that are not spread by mites. So everything else is. That's how important it is to take care of your mites. So this is sac brood. I don't know if you've ever seen it. You see the pupa, you see this kind of looks like a little bubble in a way, brown larva. And, you know, this can usually, a colony can overcome sac brood given time, and especially if there is a nectar flow going on, they can usually take care of it themselves, and it kind of disappears. It's always in the colony, but the actual pathologic signs aren't there. You know, it's always sac brood in your colony. There's always deformed wing virus in your colony. There's always, most of these viruses are always in your colony. They only cause problems when they become populated to the extent that they start causing damage. And that's when you really notice it. Now, the chronic bee paralysis virus is very interesting. So there are 2 types. The first type, and I'm sure you've all seen it, you've seen your black bees, the black abdomens, they don't have any hairs on them, and they're kind of shiny. And you know, usually there's a couple, 2, 3, you know, that you'll notice in a colony. And that's from the other bees trying to get them out of the colony. So they're biting their hairs off, trying to tell them to leave because you're sick, get out of here. Now you also can have them as they're crawling and trembling at the front of the hive, unable to fly. And I have a picture of that too. Now this is one of them, one of the viruses that has not been proven to be transmitted by Varroa. So chronic bee paralysis virus is one of those viruses that it seems to be independent of any mites. So how it gets there, who knows, but it does. So this is what chronic bee paralysis is. You can see up here the circles, the black abdomens. Oops, what happened? The black abdomens up here. You can see how shiny they are. That's chronic bee paralysis virus. This is another one you see with their wings spread and they're just kind of trembling around. I don't know if you've ever noticed that in a colony, but it does happen, and it's important to be able to recognize it. So this is another graph, and basically it's very similar to the other graph, but I spread it out and did some different colorations to it. You know, it's very interesting. And like I said, look at colony number 2A. You can see all those sac brood. And the next time, and this is after I gave them the extract, there's nothing there. Why does it keep doing that? I'm sorry. You know, I just found it was interesting. Now, as we go on, you'll see more. I have better graphs. Okay. This is the chronic bee paralysis virus, and I grouped actually I didn't group, I had a friend of mine do it. I am totally ignorant when it comes to using Excel. The only thing that I can use is Word, and I'm pretty decent at that because I'm a writer, but that's my extent of my technology. But I grouped these together so you could see all the colonies. Every colony, number 1 was sampled 4 times. As I said, I had a queen event. So after the second bar there, I have to discount it because they're just, you know, I had a queen event, I had robbing. I was not, holy, why is it doing that? I wasn't very happy with the results. And I had to get rid of it to make it scientifically valid. Number 2, which is interesting, this is a colony that had a lot of sac brood. As you can see, the chronic bee paralysis virus went up and then started coming down. Now, colony number 3 went down really nice. You know, the first one, as I said, was the baseline without any medicine, and the second column there is with the medicine. And as you can see, that's really nice. And hive number 4 kind of putzed around and seemed to go up after a while. Darn it. Now the controls, you always have to look at the controls to see if there are any patterns going on, because, you know, colonies can go up and down in virus levels by themselves. Now remember, hives 5 through 8 were not given any anything other than sugar water. And I didn't see any particular pattern. They went up, down, up, up, down, up, up, down. And the next one was the next graph I'll show you. Now this is I'm working with Dr. Zach Huang at Michigan State, and he did this analysis for me. This is a statistical analysis. The blue are the treated colonies. The gray is control. And what we found statistically is that the antivirus effect for chronic bee paralysis virus didn't kick in until between the 2nd and 3rd week. And it was statistically valid, which I thought was interesting too. So as you can see, here they're pretty much, the baseline, they're pretty much equal controls, and the medicated colonies. The same thing for the first testing period, but the second testing period and the third, after the medication was given, there seemed to be a decrease in viral levels compared to the controls. So kind of figured that there may be a delayed effect in getting rid of chronic beet paralysis virus with this extract that kicks in about 2 to 3 weeks after you give the solution. Now, this is one of the outliers that I had. It only showed up in one colony at 2 different times. Acute beet paralysis virus is spread by mites. It's nasty. It can kill a colony very quickly. And it only showed up on colony number 4. I have no idea why. I really can't explain it except to say that it's an outlier.
And it increased in the 4th round.
Yes, it did. Yep, it did. Let me get back. Okay, this is another outlier. I had black queen cell virus in 1 colony on the final testing. I have no idea where that came from. I didn't have it in any other colonies for the 4 weeks that I was doing the testing. And like I said, I have no idea where that came from. This is another one, Israeli IPV, and this one was only in the hive that got robbed out with the queen event. That's the only time it showed up. Now, like I said, these viruses on a molecular level may have been present in these colonies, but molecules themselves of the viruses don't do anything unless the molecules are assembled into a virus strand or a significant portion of a virus strand. So, this was, I thought, interesting. Apparently this colony, after it got robbed out, developed IPV. Now this is the sac brood, another representation. It's all colonies 1, this is all colony, the second colony, all 4 testing dates, 3rd, etc. Now, as I said, the colony number 1 got robbed out between the 2nd and 3rd testing period, so I really can't put any emphasis on those findings. But if you look at colony number 2, this is the one I was talking about, had 1.1 million viruses, virus particles. And after I gave them the extract, the 2nd testing, nothing. 3rd testing, that's 2 weeks later, nothing. It started to come back on the final testing. The 3rd colony that got medicated, 3A, that was the initial virus level of sac brood. The following testing period, nothing, and then it started to come back. Hive number 4 didn't have any. I look at my controls and go down, up, down, down, up. There really isn't any pattern to it, to these findings, and although hive 7 seemed to shoot up after, which is interesting. Remember, that was not given any medicine. Hive number 5 went down, up, so there may have been, I don't know, there's the decrease, or there's probably the natural fluctuation of the colony itself. That's my best guess. So this is a statistical virus analysis by Dr. Huang. Once again, this is kind of, it's backwards from the last graph that I showed you. The treated colonies are in the gray in this particular graph. If you can see here, this is sac brood, that the control, darn it, I'm sorry, it keeps happening, I'm sorry. Wow, I don't know what's going on. The sac brood in the control was there, and this is my baseline, and the treated, it was higher in the treated than it was in the control. That was before I gave them the medicine. After I gave them the medicine, though, you can see that the treated colony, the levels went way down compared statistically. You know, it isn't, like I said, the problem with my analysis that I didn't have enough colonies to make it statistically provable. But, you know, I think it's enough to say that this does indicate that something was going on with the extract in terms of reducing the viruses, the sacbrood virus. And it continued to the second treatment, second testing date, and also to the last one. So as you can see in this last one, the treated colonies, the sacbrood virus levels were much lower than the control that just received the sugar water. And this is another outlier I had. I had Israeli beet paralysis virus in one colony, and that's the one that got robbed out. And it happened right after the robbing, right after the Queen event. So I don't know what to make of it, except that, you know, some forager might have come in from another colony somewhere else around where I live, or I really don't know. You know, that's my best guess. It didn't show up in any of the other colonies. And I was happy for that, actually. Okay, these are my conclusions. Probably, I can only say probably lowers the virus levels because I did not have enough colonies to make it statistically relevant and provable. Although I think this is a proof of concept. So 2 liters of a 2% probably lowers sacbrood virus levels without anything else. And I emphasize that one colony number 2 that went from high sacbrood virus over 1.1 million to nothing, no detectable levels within 5 days after the solution's given. Now at that 1.1 million, if I would have left that go another week without having given it any medicine, I would start to see the signs that I showed you in the pictures of sacbrood. It would have started showing up. So my larva would have started getting I call them bubbly, and it just, you know, it's not a good look. And I also think that this may extend over a 21-day period and perhaps longer. So that's regarding sacbrood. Now, the 2% regarding CPBV, this was the weird thing, because it probably has an effect with the peak decrease 14 to 21 days after you give them the medicine. So apparently, there seems to be an indication that this may not be immediately effective against the CPPV, but it takes 2 weeks to 3 weeks for the medicine to work. So that was another conclusion I made. Also, we talked about why the bees did not consume it. Well, and the alcohol, you know, I might want to evaporate it or otherwise remove it from the mixture. However, I'll get into it, but I'm working with a mycologist for this year, and the mycologist told me that it has to be alcohol or glycerin. You can use glycerin, but it's a little bit different process to extract the reishi and condense it and have it viable for any period of time. The best way to do that is in alcohol. It can be done in glycerin, but you know, my mycologist was not too hot on getting rid of the alcohol. So another conclusion, maybe if I added amido, which is what they used in the original experiment in 2018, what if I added that to reishi? Would it be like a broad spectrum antibiotic? So anyway, what I did, I showed my results to Dr. Huang up at Michigan State, and I bugged him, and he finally agreed, and we put a test together for this year. Oh, these are my recommendations. Feeding them 2 liters or 2%, during winter prep may increase your overwintering by driving down virus levels, especially sac brood and chronic bee paralysis virus. Feeding your colonies the reishi during an active sac brood should lower virus levels and help the colony recover. Once again, I did not see anything wrong with any of the brood at all in any of the stages. The populations were fine. It didn't really have an effect on the bees other than lower the virus levels. So these are problems I had. I had very, very small number of colonies. I would have loved to have done it on 30 or 40 colonies. The problem was the cost. That was a big one. And also the room. When I'm doing these experiments, I can't have them in different yards because I want to, it's just too much of a hassle to drive from yard to yard, obtaining samples, in 4 different times during the summer. I just, have them in my backyard was the best way, but it was a bad thing because I had to limit my colonies. As I said, you can evaporate the alcohol from the reishi, and they would probably take it down better. As I said here, this whole thing requires, more analysis. At my apiary sites, there was definitely drifting between the hives. There was no way I could get around it. And that certainly affected my results. I don't know how it did, but I'm sure it did. So these were the problems that I encountered. So as I said, Dr. Huang, he's agreed to serve as a principal investigator. So in the months of January and February of this year, I was essentially a PhD grad student, and he was my professor, and I wrote the entire proposal with his help, probably about 25 times, but it's just incredible. I have a lot of respect for grad assistants in college that I didn't have before, just to see what they have to go through with their PhD mentors. But he said, yes, it was a proof of concept. So this year we're doing 32 colonies from packages, 16 in Southeast Michigan and 16 in Charlottesville, Virginia. We're going to use 8 colonies in each state as controls, and each colony receiving a combination of 1% and reishi and 1% amido extract. And we're going to use qualitative PCR to see it at the molecular level. Now, after we finished the proposal, we submitted it on February 1. We should know by April. He said 3 months, whether or not we'll get the funding. It's probably going to cost about $25,000 to get the PCR, because Dr. Huang said he would show an undergrad how to do the PCR. We have to hire him. For Michigan State, you have to pay him, for his medical care, all the stuff a regular employee has to be paid. That's very expensive, and we're gonna do it from packages, which will be very, very interesting. Hopefully we'll get the funding. I mean, I worked my butt off on this thing, and Rich Weisky from MBA is going to help with the study, and hopefully we'll get this thing. We'll get the funding. We'll be able to do it. So we're gonna be looking for deformed wing virus, Israeli acute paralysis virus, and sac brood. I had a hard time convincing Dr. Huang that we should go and look at sac brood, because sac brood is, like I said, it's not a sexy virus. There's been some research on it, but not very much. And all the research that's been done on it has been old. The interesting thing about sac brood that you should know is that at ABF this year, there are presentations that from scientists showing that sac brood causes drones to be infertile. So if you have a colony that has a high sac brood virus and you're trying to, and you're using that as a drone colony and you're trying to make queens and you're going to make queens with those drones, those queens may not perform very well. They may be drone layers. They may have snotty, they may have shotgun brood. The brood patterns might be terrible. Maybe one of the reasons is the fact that the drones were infected with sac brood virus, which kills the sperm. That is just something that's coming up now. There's finally starting to get some interest in drones. I know that they have been looking at queens for the past 20 years to try to figure out how come the queens nowadays are much worse as the queens were 30 years ago, and they can't find anything physically wrong with them. And maybe the problem isn't with the queen. Maybe some of the problems are with the drones and with sac brood virus. I really feel strongly that if you're raising queens and using drone colonies, that you should use Reishi to bring your sac brood down as low as you can for those drones. So they'll be healthy, they'll have healthy sperm, and they'll be able to mate effectively with queens. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're not going to be knowing whether the sugar water, whether what we're giving to the colonies has the medicine or it doesn't. Only Dr. Huang will know that. And we're going to do 3 tests of baseline and 1 on day 17 and day 30. And I'll look at a PCR. I really hope that we get the funding. I put a lot of time into putting this proposal together. It was about 16 pages, single spaced. So the other thing I wanted to say about the entire experiment, one of the things that you always hear are that feral bees are the best. You hear that feral bees are those, that you always want to get swarms that are feral bees, and you want them in your colonies, etc. And the reason you want them in your colonies are, they're great. They're not affected by viruses. They're much better. Well, maybe if you think about it, feral bees are usually found in trees, typically in a hollowed out tree, a rotting tree. Maybe inside that nest, at the bottom of the nest, where the wood is rotting, maybe there is some antivirus medicine being produced by the fungi that's degrading the wood. That's very interesting, I think, and that may be one of the reasons why feral bees seem to be healthier than the bees that we keep in our boxes. The other thing, too, that I think is very interesting, if you think about it, it's analogous, this mushroom extract, it's analogous in the bee world to Alexander Fleming when he discovered penicillin. They didn't have anything before 1936. They didn't have anything at all to deal with bacteria other than sulfa. After they did this, then, they discovered penicillin, and wow, we have increased survival rates from infections, etc. But, in terms of bees, we didn't have anything. So until the extract came through. Now, I gave this presentation to the Lansing Bee Club, and somebody did some research and found out that Paul Stamets was trying to get patents on Reishi mushroom extract to give to bees. He has his own particular Reishi species that he found, or somebody gave him, that's from Ontario, and he's trying to patent that and trying to keep other people from using it. He's trying to make a buck. And it's too bad because the guy professes to be an old hippie like me, and very interested in the money. He's definitely a hell of a capitalist, and he's making a lot of money, and I think that's very interesting. But yeah, so this type of research, I think, is really important. And I think that, like I said, there hasn't been anything else in the literature. I saw an article earlier this summer that they were using a Chinese herb, and it lowered virus levels in bees. And that was the first thing that I saw that even close to what Paul Stamets in Washington State reported. We finally getting to a point where we can add something to the sugar water that will actually lower virus levels in bees. But there hasn't been anything, and why? Well, I think that it's all a matter of money. Somebody wants to make the bucks on it and didn't publish anymore. And they probably have done some more research, but they haven't published it. I tried to contact the people at Washington State. They won't talk to me. So, something's going on. But anyway, so that's all I have about that.
Well, there's some questions here.
Sure.
I kind of held back because you were kind of on a roll. So kind of earlier on, and Rachel, if you want to contextualize this at all. Was it pesticides / other chemicals in the environment that affected the mycelium? So this was early on, and I don't remember that the context for that. And once the studies were reconducted in the field, were there studies in urban areas with similar results? So I think she's referring to the initial study.
Right. The original study, no, they didn't do it in an urban area. As far as I know, they did it in Washington State, outside the laboratory, outside on the campus. I think Washington State is in a semi-rural part of Washington, close to where those ladies got killed. I think that was Washington State University, just across the border from Idaho. So it was up there, and that's where I think they did it.
Yeah, I just wondered if like there might be environmental factors that could affect the impact here, but just wondering
Here,
what was it, in the field when they conducted in the field, what was different compared to the lab? Something's always different.
right.
And if it was different outside of the lab compared to in the lab in Washington, I was just thinking about Michigan, but that was like Keto said, that was early on when you started talking. So
Right. It might have been, the environment. I'm sure the environment played a role in this, and between the field and the laboratory. And it always does. Anything that you do out in the field is not going to work out as well as it does in the lab, because you can control everything in the lab. You can't control the environment in the field. So in terms of what the particular inputs were that caused the problems, I don't know, or caused the differences. But that's one of the reasons why I used the 2% instead of 1%. I wanted to make sure that I got the effect that was written about, that I could, that would lower the virus levels.
And then the next question Rachel had was, and I think this is referring to the experiment that you did, were all the colonies at approximately the same age and level of maturity? Like everything,
Yes.
Everything else was kind of same.
Yes. In fact, I equalized the colonies out. I used the stock from my overwintered hives colonies. I bought new queens and installed them in June. So the queens came from the same source. They were the same. They're Russian carnies. They were from the same source. I got them on the same day and put them in there in each one of the colonies. So I didn't want to, any variation there. So genetically, I'm sure they're all different, because we know how bees are very promiscuous. Queens are, and for the diversity, it's a good thing. And like I said, as far as I could do it, as far as I could control everything, they were from the same colonies that I overwintered. The stock, the frames they were all new this year. They were all drawn, last year. They're all drawn out in the spring and early summer of 2022. So there weren't any old combs. I try to minimize as much as I could the variables, like you said, pesticides, all the other crap that's in the environment certainly affects bees. And I tried to limit that and eliminate as much as I could.
Okay. Could there be a difference in the effectiveness of either solution at different points in the season?
You know, that's a good question. This year's experiment is gonna be in the spring, I hope, or early summer. The problem we're gonna have is if they approve the funding in April, where am I gonna get 32 colonies, 32 packages, especially when, let's say if I don't learn until the end of April, where am I gonna find 32 packages that are for sale from the same source in this area? You know, I'm gonna drive 16 of them down to Virginia. So same stock will be for the experiment, but you know, there may be a difference. Like I said, virus levels naturally go up and down during the course of the year. Sac brood usually peaks in spring, early summer, and then goes down and then comes back toward the end of the season. The other viruses, it all depends on your mite infestations. And as you know, as time goes on, you get more and more mites during the summer, and you get more and more viruses out also. So, you know, the problem that we have is that nobody, you know, we can't find packages late summer. They're just not available for purchase. You know, you might be able to make up a few from your stock, but you're not going to get 30. I'm not going to find 32 packages or be able to make them up from my stock in late summer. So yes, you know, I'm sure that at different times of the year, different times of the season, different viruses peak at different times. And you would probably get different results doing it at different times. But as a way of actually getting rid, you know, doing something about the viruses, I think now we have an indication that this stuff works. It doesn't cause any harm to the bees. And, you know, that's pretty good.
So, I think that's well, I just have a thought. I think we're good with the chat questions, and we'll open it up to the group in a second here. But I just wondering if you could go back to that slide of kind of your current recommendation for.
Okay, sure. Okay.
So
Here we
people
go.
can capture that, and I'm going to
There
actually
you
take
go.
a picture.
Yep. That one.
Hold on one sec. Great. And let's see, and for timing, would you do this? Do you have any just I know we're still in the science phase or however, but you know, with your current knowledge, how would you, when would you administer this?
Well, I can tell you what I did and what I do. This 2022, I fed all my colonies, whether they needed it or not. I fed them at least 2 liters of sugar water with reishi mushroom, 2% reishi mushroom extract in September and early October.
Mm-hmm.
And I only have right now, I think I got 30 colonies. I think I have 28 alive. And that's my best overwintering I've had.
Yeah.
So my suggestion is you can do it in the spring when you're feeding them to keep the levels low, especially sac brood. But the more important time is at the end of the season. So you know, once you've got your mites under control, as I said, the viruses are still there. And if you give it to them later in the season, in winter prep, they're gonna have their best chance of having reduced virus levels.
Can you tell me again? I think I missed the number. What was your survival rate this year?
Well, it's 28 survived out of 30.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, because this is something that we've been talking about based on some recommendations from MBA last year, the oxalic dribble in late season, November timeframe. Did you do late season?
Yeah, I did two. I always do this. I vape them twice. I usually vape them around Thanksgiving and around Christmas.
Okay.
I
So
give them.
yes, you didn't do the dribble, but you did oxalic
I
treatment.
don't do the dribble. The dribble, interestingly enough, there's research that has come out that has shown that the dribble, oxalic acid on the cuticles of the bees actually weakens the cuticles. So
boy.
in
Yeah.
other words, yeah, that to me is pretty significant. They measured the thickness of the cuticles in bees that had dribble and those that did not have dribble. And
Yeah.
those that had the dribble have thinner shells than those that were not dribbled.
Yeah. Well,
And that's just
Yeah.
recently, that's within the
Yeah.
last 18 months.
we find something that we think is going to be helpful, and then but I think I'm thus far doing okay. So we just keep plugging along, I guess, and trying
Yep.
things and working with what works best.
That's what we do. Yep.
Okay, anybody else in the group have questions for Rick? There was a lot of this is some deep science here, Rick. This is pretty amazing to
Well,
do for somebody, a citizen scientist, to be doing this kind of level of experimentation is pretty intense.
well, I've been a medical malpractice attorney for 44 years, and I'm in the process of retiring. So I love science. I have to know my medicine when I'm taking testimony from doctors. I have to know it pretty much as well as they do, maybe better, the particular subject matter and the research. So I'm used to it. And bees are perfect for me. It keeps my mind sharp when I'm doing this, especially as I get older. It keeps me sharp, and it keeps me wondering, I can use the skills that I obtained in my practicing for the last 44 years and try to apply them in some way to my beekeeping. And,
Yeah, right on.
I have a question.
Sure.
I know you were not looking at this particularly, but could that be this mushrooms have any effects on the varroa mites?
Well, no, I don't think it would, and not on the mites themselves, because remember, the bees are taking this internally.
Right.
And yeah, and maybe if I don't know, maybe the mites, when they bite the bees and start devouring the fat bodies, maybe that, they could get some reishi, but I don't think it would do anything to the mites. Mites are pretty darn resilient, That's a good point. It would be great to have a way of doing that with that would kill the mites and help the bees at the same time. That would.
Well, while we have you, Rick, I know you had another presentation that related to just your mite treatment strategy. And I guess, it would be interesting to hear in that, but also just kind of your overall your regimen, your kind of protocols that you do for bee care, like your cadence for treatments or checks and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, if you don't have time tonight, I'd love to give you a presentation on what I do. Because
we have till 8, so we have another half an hour, but I think people would be interested, if you could kind of, however makes sense, but I think particularly would be interesting to hear.
Okay, I'll run through it very quickly, and
strategy.
I won't take as long as I did this time. Let me figure out. Use my boom. See how we can do this. Get out of these schemes.
So you should be able to go back down to the bottom of the screen and unclick that. It should come up. End show. There you go. At bottom, end show, bottom. There you go.
Okay. And I'll bring the next one up. Yep. All right. Let's see. This first. Let's see. I'm gonna have to get out of this first and go back into it. Like I said, the problem with being old is that I wasn't born with the at all with the okay. All right. Can you see that?
Not yet.
Okay, let's see.
Go out to the Zoom share screen button.
Okay, hold on. Zoom. Let's see. Okay, hold on, share screen. Okay. All right, here we go. Okay. You see it now?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So this is what I do. It may not, as I said, it may not work for you, but this is how I control my mites. I highly recommend going to scientific beekeeping. Randy Oliver, who I've met many, many times at conferences, you know, he's probably the most type A person I've ever met in my life. If you can get him to talk about one thing for 30 seconds, you've really done something without him going all over the place. But the man is very smart. He is not a PhD. He's a master's biologist, but he has his own commercial apiary in California, and he does a lot of beekeeper related research. So I use Swedish sponges. I take a sponge, cut it in half, and I use 2 halves per 8 to 10 brood box, or 1 half, and I'll get into it how I do it. But this is a technique that Mr. Oliver developed, and it's published on that scientific beekeeping website. It just tells you how to do it and what his results were. So these are the Swedish sponges. I don't know if you can get them on Amazon, you get them at dollar stores. This is what they look like. They're very, very thin, and they're cellulose. So they're natural, they're not plastic. And it's, you know, that's what I do. And what I do is I cut them in half, and then I put them in a plastic container. I get some vegetable glycerin. It's about $20 for a gallon on Amazon. And I get some oxalic acid. Now, this is the pure stuff. You know, you can get the stuff that's 99.6%. It really doesn't matter. And you need a scale. And you need a beat up old pot, because my wife would kill me if I used one of the good ones. So this is what I do. I weigh equal amounts of oxalic acid and glycerin in 2 separate containers by weight. I weigh them and then set them aside. Then I pour the oxalic acid into the pot, and I slowly add the glycerin to the oxalic acid. And I put it on the stove. I have a gas stove. It isn't flammable. You don't have to worry about it. And I heat it to about 160, and I'm stirring. I heat very slowly to dissolve the oxalic acid, and I stir it frequently. When the mixture turns clear, because the glycerin is clear, you know it's done. It's properly mixed. Don't keep it on the stove to the point where it's bubbling. That's about 175 degrees. That's way too hot. So then I take it and I remove it from the stove and I let it cool for a couple minutes. Then I slowly pour the mixture over the sponges in the plastic container. I should say that I do this with, I usually take about 20 of those Swedish sponges and cut them in half. And I do, so I'll do, basically 40 half sponges at a time. Then I'll pour the mixture over the sponges, make sure that each half sponge is thoroughly saturated. I use tongs to flip them back and forth. And then I put it away for at least a couple hours to let the oxalic acid crystallize. And the sponges should weigh about 25 grams saturated. You really can't put much more than 25 grams in those things because they only hold so much. You should wear nitrile vinyl waterproof gloves because oxalic acid is an acid. It isn't really bad acid, but it can irritate your skin and really screw up your eyes if you got it in that. So you have to be kind of careful. And it's a powder. Remember that it's a powder. It really likes moisture, and unfortunately moisture degrades it. So you don't want to, you want to make sure that when you take the oxalic acid out of the bag that you seal it very, very well. Otherwise the moisture will get in it and will degrade the oxalic acid. Okay. So I use this is an extended treatment. It will not lower your mite levels quickly because it works by contact. The mites, the bees get it on their bodies. And the mites will try to get on the bees. And the theory is right now that the acid seems to burn the pads that the mites have at the bottom of their feet. And it only works when they're in the dispersal stage. It used to be called the phoretic stage. It will not kill mites under the cappings. Okay, it isn't like formic. Formic is the only thing that I'm aware of that will kill mites under the cappings. Unfortunately, formic is rough on the colony. Bees don't like it. Queens really don't like it. And, they're, especially an older queen can be killed by the formic. So you can use this at any time. It's safe and effective, spring, summer. Temperature doesn't matter. It's very expensive. Not very inexpensive, and it's easy. I mean, I like easy and I like cheap. So I religiously, every one of my colonies, I wash 300 bees in alcohol, where I use the Dawn dish soap dissolved in a gallon of water. Randy Oliver came up with that. And I'm looking at my percentage of varroas. I wash each one of my colonies at least once a month. Okay, so even in the spring when I'm right about to put these on the colonies, I know what my mite levels are. So I put 2 half sponges across the top bars in the brood nest in late April, early May. And I take them out 60 to 75 days later, which is sometime in July, mid-July. The reason I monitor is constantly throughout the entire process, because you can get an influx of mites from some other person's colony crashing, and there are different ways of getting big increases in mites. If that happens, even with these pads on, then I'll use Formic or Hop Guard if the honey supers are on. I leave the sponges alone. Like I said, I don't touch them for usually middle of July, and 75 days about. You can do this is effective as long as the brood is being produced. But make sure, look at your brood frames to make sure that you don't have something going on, viruses, fungi, or bacteria, chalk brood, sac brood, EFB, AFB. I cannot, I've heard so many people talk about, I don't treat, I'm not treating. Well, that's great for you, but it all depends on where you are. I'm really convinced of that, especially in an urban, suburban area. There's so many beekeepers who don't know what they're doing. Their colonies get overtaken by mites, and you're going to get them. And, you just can, in this day and age, in this particular location, I don't think you can get away with not treating. without doing a lot of interventions such as caging your queens, etc., which is a really big hassle and will delay the affect the population of your hives. So, okay, considerations. I always look at my brood frames every inspection, usually in the spring, early summer. I'm going into my colonies every 7 to 10 days. I never skip, at least until mid-June. Then, you know, when there's a flow on, you know, I just leave them alone pretty much. I consider, like I said, 2 to 3% too high, because one of the things that as the season goes on, as you know, you get more and more brood, boom, 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 until August, and the brood production starts going down. Well, the mites, where the mites in the colony, they're underneath the cappings. And as those bees hatch and less brood is being produced, those mites are then on the bees. So you're getting higher levels. So you want, the trick to this whole thing is to get those pads on early and leave them on. Because if you start killing your mites early, you're going to have more success as the summer goes on. Now, people use Apivar. I've had it with Apivar. You know, I used it several years ago, and I had horrible losses. And I really think, and there have been papers and more studies going on, there is Amitraz resistance. So after 20 plus years of using Amitraz or Apivar, the mites now are basically eating it. You know, in fact, when I saw a mite crawling across one of my Apivar strips, I said, what the hell is going on? That ain't good, you know. And people, especially a lot of commercial people, were using this product called Tactic, which is basically Amitraz that they put on pigs and cows to keep ticks off them. It's much more concentrated than Apivar. And, you know, I think that may have been one of the reasons why the mites are getting resistant to it, because they had, you know, every time the commercial people who are illegally using Tactic, they started getting losses, they put more Tactic in. Well, if you put more and more in, the mites that survive are going to be super mites, and they're not going to be effective. My advice is don't use Apivar. Okay, these are my considerations. Monitor before, during, and after using this treatment. The same thing with any other mite treatment. I always use IPM. I'll get into that in a second. I've never had any problems using the sponges, but OA is not approved for use with honey supers on. The FDA came down last year. Actually, it was in 2021, 2022, and said that they're not they're not looking at honey and evaluating it for oxalic acid. They don't think that it's not a contaminant. Now, people have taken that to mean that, you know, it's okay to use oxalic acid when your honey supers are on. It is not yet. Randy Oliver has filed a petition with the EPA, and it's been supported by several of the USDA bee scientists, but EPA moves very, very slowly in approving anything. So anyway, last year, it's the first full year I used this. I had difficulty finding any mites in my washes. So especially in June, in fact, Rich Weisky was with me in one of my yards, and we're washing, and I'm not getting any mites, and neither is he. And he's just shaking his head, you know. I really think this stuff works. It works well as long as you use it correctly and put it on at the right time and leave it alone. So this is the IPM. As you know, you've probably seen this: cultural practices, caging your queen, getting rid of drone brood because mites prefer drones, physical and mechanical control, monitor. Biopesticides are at the top of the pyramid. This is a biopesticide. It's a natural organic compound, concentrated, but it is still a chemical. And you want to try other things first. I just, every time the colonies that I've caged my queen for any particular length of time, or done for a brood break, the populations decrease. It's a lot of work. And, you know, I just, with especially more and more colonies that I have, it's just too onerous to keep doing that. So anyway, use IPM. Don't reapply the sponges after removing them in mid-July. There isn't enough time in the season for this to be effective. And remember, this is a slow killer. It doesn't kill them all at once. You're not going to find dead mites at the bottom of your boards. If you put this on and 3 weeks later you check your the bottom of your boards and there's no, you know, you're not going to find a ton of mites dead like you would with formic or some other thing. It won't work if there's robbing or dearth or collapsing colonies or mite bombs from other colonies collapsing, you know, because it basically creates an environment unique to that colony, and you don't want to increase the population with other bees from different colonies because they're bringing in mites. And as I said before, mite levels invariably increase in late July, August, September, due to brood production decreasing, causing more dispersal mites. Now, what I do, that isn't the only thing I do. So last year I used Apalifar. I've used Apagard. I'm probably going to use Apagard this year. I like to rotate after my supers are removed in August, September. So, you know, it's really important. That's your last shot, August, September. And even if you had high mite levels all summer, and then you finally decide to treat in August, September, you're going to have dead hives. The reason is because simply, you know, those viruses tend to concentrate with more and more mites. And, you know, it's just not a good thing. So I always watch population and brood production using thymol. Both of these contain thymol. Apalifar, if any of you have used it, it comes in it's expensive. It's an old time treatment. It's got thymol, eucalyptus, I forget what else in it, but it comes in like a tablet, and you break one of those tablets in 4, and you put them in the corners of the brood nest. You put a quarter of a tablet there, a quarter of a tablet, boom, 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 you know, surrounding your brood box, and you just leave them alone. Apagard can be done a couple of different ways. You can use 25 grams and put it on a piece of plastic or I don't know, cardboard. And what will happen, the bees will try to take it out of the hive. As they take it out of the hive, the thymol gets on them, and it kills the mites that way. Apalifar doesn't do it that way. It does it by vapor. And you'll see that when you use the Apalifar, the bees will try to propolize over the place where you put the tablets. They hate thymol, but they don't hate it as much as formic. As I said, I rotate between the two, and I also feed them reishi extract when topping the colonies off with feed before late fall. Even if you get your varroa levels under control before fall, the viruses still remain and can kill. When using these methods, my overwintering survival has increased. I first tried the sponges on half of my colonies 2 years ago, and those colonies did very, very well compared to the other ones. Last year, I put them on all my colonies, and 28 out of 30 ain't bad. So I really think that it does work, but the key to killing mites is you got to constantly kill them. You can't just kill them in August and expect to win. You got to keep killing them all year, all season long. And this is one nice way. It really doesn't bother the bees at all. You know, the bees don't mind it. You won't see them propolizing these sponges very much. You know, they sometimes will try to bite them and take the pieces of the sponges out, which is great because you know that the glycerin is basically holding the oxalic acid in kind of a solution, and the mites will then be exposed to oxalic acid and drop to the bottom and die. So you know, those are some interesting things. So anyway, the EPA has not approved this. It has approved vaping or sublimation and dribble. But I guess if you use glycerin and put it on sponges, they haven't, you know, they want test results and data and stuff. And I know it's been provided to them, and I know those applications are pending. But using oxalic acid in colonies is okay at the EPA and okay in Michigan. But in Michigan, I'm sorry, let me back up. In certain other states, you have to basically ask your state for a special use exemption permit in order to do this. California is one of those. In Michigan, you can use this as long as you don't distribute, sell, or offer for sale your sponges. And it's for personal and private use only. So it's the only thing, you know, I mean, is it legal? Yes, it's legal in Michigan to do it. You know, it's not legal from the EPA to use this with your honey supers on. I unfortunately am a scofflaw, and I have used it on my colonies with my honey supers on, and I haven't found any problems at all. And the honey is fine. So above all, you know, be careful, you know, observe, look, you know, question when you're doing your inspections. You know, keep these things going in your mind. Am I seeing anything unusual? Are all my larvae nice and white, it's glistening white? Is there any discoloration anywhere? What are my populations like? What do the cappings look like? Do they have any holes in them? Have they been recapped by the bees, et cetera, et cetera? You just have to, you know, be very observant. And, you know, I always research the most recent science. I get at least, I get bee journals from England, Australia. I get, of course, all the ones in the United States, but I constantly am looking at the literature. I go to at least 3 national conventions a year. I go to EAS, which I think is the best one. I go to ABF, and I also go to the American Honey Producers too. I've been to that one. So these are all places where you're going to get science, and you're going to see the scientists, and it's going to be explained to you, and you can go up and talk to the scientists after and ask them questions. It's really worth it. If you haven't been to a national convention yet, go to one. You know, it's a little expensive, but it's well worth the money. And it's you know, ABF, American Beekeeping Federation, was in Jacksonville this last January. Not a bad place to be. I learned a lot. You know, how should I put it? The best bee scientists in the world were there internationally. And EAS, and this year it's going to be in Massachusetts. I would highly, highly recommend that you go to EAS. That's the Eastern Apiculture Society. They're the oldest multi-state organization. They have great conferences on all levels of beekeeping, just fantastic. But once again, kill your mites dead, real dead, dead.
Great.
But when
you.
is the conference?
EAS is at the last week of July.
July, okay.
ABF is in January, beginning of January, and next year it's in New Orleans.
Oh, that'd be nice.
not a bad place. American Honey Producers was in Tucson in November. I don't know where it is this year, but you know, I really think EAS is the best, especially for, you know, practice. It's not only theory, there's a lot of practice. You can take microscopy courses there during the conference. You can learn how to look for nosema. You can learn, you know, it's hands-on. You can learn so much stuff there, and you meet so many great people, so many beekeepers, and it's just a fantastic place. I cannot highly recommend it any more than I could. So, any questions?
Yeah, this material, Peter, will we or Rick will be able to access that through our email or something?
Right, that was a question I had. Would you be willing to share maybe a PDF of your presentations?
Sure.
Or-
Sure.
Okay,
In fact, what I can do, Kaito, I'll send you. I think one of them has to go on Google Drive,
uh-huh,
but I'll send them to you. No problem.
okay, great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to share, because there's definitely a lot more people in our group, and I'm gonna share the recording as well as the slides if you'd be game for that.
Sure, I have no problem. I mean, I did this for my own good, and if I could help somebody do it, then that's great.
There's a question in the chat here. Do you rotate your mite meds within one season or from season to season?
Season to season. Well, kind of, because I this year I will probably use sponges again, depending on what my levels are coming out of winter. But I'll use something. I've used Hop Guard in the spring. The problem with Hop Guard that I found is when you drape them over the flames, the bees, the queen will not lay underneath there. The bees don't like it. The stuff stinks, but it's kind of effective. People used to use Apivar in the spring because it's not temperature dependent and it's a 60-day treatment, 56-day treatment. But like I said, Apivar is not working anymore. You don't want to use thymol in the spring because thymol can get into your honey and your honey will taste funny. So if you do any, I harvest at the end of June for my spring harvest. And if I use thymol, all my honey would taste yucky. So I don't, I'll figure out, I'll probably use the sponges again this year, but then toward the end, I'll probably use Apiguard instead of Apilifar. I'm unaware of any mites having any resistance whatsoever to thymol. I don't think it's possible physiologically.
Yeah.
I have used formic. If the temperature is fine, the problem with formic, if you put it on and it's 78 degrees, the next day it shoots up to 90, you got a lot of dead bees.
Yeah.
That's the problem. In the
I've heard
summer.
about people just like doing strategies, half treatments, or
Right.
or venting or putting them out in the open for a little day and then.
Well, I've done it different ways. Randy Oliver on his website has left the wrapper on the top to slow the release of formic. The problem is it doesn't penetrate the cappings then as well. That is the problem. That is the big kicker between using the 2 pads at once versus 1 pad. Now I won't use 2 pads. I did that when I first started beekeeping and killed colonies with it, and I won't do that. So I'll use at the most, I'll use a 1 pad and then wait 10 days and put the other pad on if it's formic, but it's got to be cool. I will not put it on over 80 degrees. That's just me. I don't like dead queens. It really bums me out when I go in and I see dead queens.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, for sure.
But I try to rotate as much as possible. The problem with Apivar is people just use Apivar, and now the mites are, like I said, when you see a mite running across an Apivar strip, something's wrong.
Yeah, right. Okay, well, we're getting towards the end of time here. Do we have any more questions for Rick before we start to wrap things up? Okay. There's a lot of good information. This Swedish sponge idea is it's definitely new to me. We've been doing oxalic, like I said, we on the kind of recommendation of a few folks, Rich Whiskey, one of them, we've been doing the dribble. Handful of us did dribble last fall and feel good about that. But hear your caution there.
Yep.
So this would be kind of another approach, and I think it's real interesting that it's kind of a slow and long thing to put on for spring, and it doesn't take a whole lot of effort. So I think
Yeah.
that's a welcome concept for sure.
And it doesn't do anything bad. That's
Right.
the best thing. You just won't kill anything if you do it. except
Right.
mites.
Could you, and before, we have the video, but if you could, and we'll have the slides, but if you could just quickly review where to put them.
Oh, sure.
Like once
So what
they're-
I do, I cut them in half, soak them, and then let them sit, let the oxalic acid crystallize. Then I put a half draped over on the right-hand side of the brood nest, and then about 4 inches apart, I'll put the other one. And I just put them perpendicular to the frames, so they
Uh-huh.
don't fall in between. And
So
just-
2 pads right above the brood nest.
yep,
Okay.
Yep. You don't want to put them underneath a feeder, right underneath a feeder, because that's just not good. You want to put them in the brood nest. If you've got a double brood nest, put them in between
Yeah,
the boxes.
right.
Yep. But like I said, the most important thing that, if you don't get anything out of anything I told you today, the one thing that I really think you should take home is you have to start killing mites early.
Yeah,
Kill them early, keep those levels down.
right. Yeah, it's a good point for sure. I can see the logic there for sure.
So
Um,
I will send you everything in an email, Kaido.
Okay.
So I really like doing this, and I appreciate you people listening to me.
Yeah, thanks so
Thank
much for your
you.
time.
Thank you.
We appreciate you. So yeah, we'll follow up with the video and slides from Rick, and we'll wrap things up for the evening. Good to hear everybody's voices and gather today. Stay tuned. I do want to make a reminder. Please, everybody, if you haven't already filled out the Bee Club application, please do that. There's some information in there that I'm gathering to help with mutual aid in terms of supporting each other. So if you haven't done that yet, that would be really, it's a good thing. And it's, trying to figure out ways to support everybody in the club. And I'll be sending that out again with the follow-up. And with that, I think we'll wrap it up for the night. And
Kilo,
yes,
I have a quick question. It's kind of related to the bees in the sense that told you I wanted to put Rose and I was moving our hives and was gonna put it over there where the trees, fruit trees. So I was hoping that the trees come before the bees come. So when is these trees come?
I don't just because you can figure out where to put the bees
No, because in order for the trees, the volunteers to help plant the trees, what they were gonna have. You see what I'm saying?
Well, we're gonna be doing it early April, so I don't, that shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, that's what I was trying to figure.
Most packages are, I'm not sure where you're getting bees from, but bees are usually coming in mid-late April, so if we
So she'll be before then.
Yeah,
That's what I wanted.
the
Okay,
timing,
thank
I
you.
think should work out. Yeah.
Bye-bye, folks.
Okay.
Bye,
Goodbye,
Rick. Thank
everybody.
you. Have a good week.
Okay, you too.